Hey there. At the last video I said I would be a little more religious, or do a little more sermony and not be so political. But something has happened. There's a development now, and what it is it's the Supreme Court included sexual orientation in the Civil Rights Act of '64. So they didn't create law like someone's been saying. Instead, they just extended the legal protections that was already there to another group, another identified group that is now a minority. Thank God. So it's inclusion is what it is. And the religious right is saying that we shouldn't be included for some reason. And like Franklin Graham here, he said on a tweet that he believes this decision erodes religious freedoms across the country. People of sincere faith who stand on God's word as their foundation for life should not be forced by the government to compromise their religious beliefs. Christian organizations should never be forced to hire people who do not align with their biblical beliefs, and should not be prevented from terminating a person whose lifestyle and beliefs undermine the ministry's purpose and goals. Now, I really have to ask, how does sex between two people undermine a ministry's purpose and goals? Same. I mean, we're not doing anything in front of them. We're not doing we're not going after their children or anything. We're consenting adults in the privacy of our own home on the other side of town. And how does that, seriously, how does that action itself, how does that, the fact of what is truly ultimately love between two people, the way that it is for an entire segment of the population that is so aligned in this way? And how is that suddenly or whatever, how does that ever undermine a religious ministry? And let's take a look at the word undermine for a minute here. There's two definitions that come up in the dictionary. One is erode the base. Definition one is erode the base or foundation of a rock formation. Number two is lessen the effectiveness, power, or ability of, especially gradually or insidiously. Obviously, Franklin means the second meaning of the word. Insidiously, he says, we undermine his ministry. Well, his ministry is obviously one of governance. Because now he's going to tell us what to do. And if we don't, then he's going to disenfranchise us, as they do. That is the result of it. And not only do they want to disenfranchise us from their church, they want the right to then disenfranchise us from the larger society. And that's ultimately what we have here. And it's not really so much the morality of anything in particular, or whether or not God may approve. It all comes down to their desire to govern, to use religion as a form of governance. To be this from that. And so they target a group of people to villainize, as any fascist organization does, to then prosecute. Whether it's justified or not is irrelevant in the end. Because all that really matters is that they have the other to then point to say, you should then follow our leadership. Now, if you really consider the reality of what this is this from that thought logic, once again presented in religious values. Them from us, right and wrong, good from evil. And what it is it's a demand to conformity. They believe they have the right to demand and force the society beyond the walls of their church to then conform to them and what they demand that society then be. And if we don't oblige them, then all of a sudden they don't have the religious freedom by which to govern the rest of us through their dogma. And that's really what they want to do. They say suddenly, well, you're not listening to what we say in church, so therefore, how dare you act as you are in public? You know, now you're offending my religious freedom to live in a world free of gay people. You know, just like every fascist ever says, to live in a world free of Mesoamericans, to live in a world free of Neanderthal, to live in a world free of, you know, various other groups, so that they can subvert the word of God in order to achieve a state of governance over humankind. And they do so. And this particular group, like the Franklin Graham here, see, this is not, this guy's in the church, right? And it goes on and he says, as a Bible-believing follower of Jesus Christ, my rights should be protected. Well, they are. Franklin, you fucking moron. What is not protected is stuff that is not your right. You do not have the right to govern the society beyond the confines of your frickin' world. You know, to govern the society in a large degree. And call it a religious right. To then demand conformity to a one life lived in one way only point of view that is the absolute dictate of the Christian idea that they present. The evangelical right. And he says, even if my sincerely held religious beliefs might be the minority. And now what belief is that? That suddenly, what happened, suddenly, you know, I just don't get that. What, it's not just a belief. It's a dictate of obedience for them. And I imagine his religious beliefs are such that he believes it is his religious right to be obeyed by the society. I still have a right to hold them. Well, yeah, in your own heart, sure. Bring that corruption upon the plane of death with you. Go right ahead. The same holds true for a Christian organization. Okay, now that's where we're crossing the line. Because you see, in spite of the fact that Citizens United may have given a corporation the identity of a person, God sure as hell doesn't. So therefore, this claim here does not hold true for a Christian organization. Because Christian organizations are about obedience to a single life, a one life lived in one way only point of view, which is entirely antithetical to the reality of consciousness in the third dimensional plane, which is a unique experience for every person, and therefore every life is unique and entitled to be lived uniquely, in full embrace of the true identity of that individual person that is in their heart. Not to conform to some damn church that tries to build a temple upon the plane of death and force God to sit in a throne in there. And that's where the winds of change shall blow such temples from the plane of death and from what is God's eventual society. So he then goes on to say that these are the freedoms our nation was founded on. No, they're not. Quite the opposite, as a matter of fact, because the people that landed here, that created America, did so to escape religious governance. Yeah, they might have instituted it within themselves, some other form of dumbass religion. But in the end, the concept of what is America the Free is not in obedience to the Christian life concept of, the nuclear family, straight white American point of view. Everyone in obedience to the point of having goddamn hot dogs for lunch on Wednesdays. I mean, Jesus. And then he says, the Supreme Court does not override and will never overturn the Word of God. And what Word of God is that? If you're going to say Leviticus, then son, apparently you never heard of Moses. One day we will all have to stand before God. Nah, not really. Yeah, well, one day. It's like every time you get there. In a way, you stand before God, yes. The righteous judge. See how that is? This is creation. This is not judgment. And in that, there's a great deal of latitude. And as it's creation, look, there's like an inspection that happens in between the things. The compartmentalized states of consciousness that everyone reincarnates through in what is the reality of this third dimensional plane of consciousness. And there's an examination, but there is not a judgment. I mean, look, if you want a judgment from God, judgment is a very personal thing. It's like what Franklin Graham is going to find when he gets upon a plane of death. There is going to be a personal judgment between God and him. That much is for certain because of this kind of stuff that he does. He calls God the righteous judge. In other words, he is the one that builds a temple upon the plane of death and then tries to force God on a throne in it, to sit upon a throne in his temple that he builds for God. In the same way that the Muslims try to do. They try to do that same thing. Build their temple upon the plane of death and then force God to live in it. And that's what God will not be governed in that respect. And see what Franklin then says. He goes, the righteous judge whose decisions are not based on politics or the whims of culture. And then he goes, his laws are true and are the same yesterday, today, and forever. Now, see the very fact. First off, his laws are true. First off, God doesn't have laws. This is not about God in governance, and yet Franklin fails the realization of what our relationship is with God. So therefore, his laws are true. God doesn't have laws. So therefore, that's an irrelevant statement. And the idea that they are the same yesterday, today, and forever is proof of the concept of God in a state of perfection. And as is such, this is an admission that whatever Franklin has in his mind as God's law is such that it cannot change. And therefore, he then opposes discovery and the advancement of society. This kind of philosophy is what will guarantee humanity's end. And that's why they have it in their Bible, is because that's what it is. It's an end times Bible. You follow them, they end the world. And they think they're righteous in it, which is the real irony. Because you see, ultimately in the end, as I've said before, God is hardwired to human experience for sexuality. And unfortunately, and fortunately, look, those of us who are the adults in the room fully understand what that is about. So, the true repugnance is the idea of religion and governance. And that's really the true repugnant thing here. So last month, I guess it's been about a month now. Last video I did, I said I was going to get a little more preachy, on the religious side. But instead, I like to go a little more philosophical, actually. I want to talk, for the remainder of this video here, about what is called the Epicurean Paradox. Epicurus was a Greek philosopher who lived in Greece between 341 and 270 BC. He's the founder of what's called Epicureanism. So the Epicurean Paradox is where he says, is where God, he says, either wishes to take away evils and is unable, or he is able and is unwilling, or he is neither able, or he is both willing and able, or he is neither willing nor able. If he is willing and is unable, he is feeble, which is not in accordance with the character of a God. If he is able and unwilling, he is envious, which is equal at variance with God. If he is neither willing nor able, he is both envious and feeble, and therefore not God. If he is both willing and able, which alone is suitable to God, from what source then are evils? Or why does he not remove them? You see, that is the... when I first hit upon that a while back, I saw it, what it is to try to comprehend the relationship between humanity and God from an unenlightened state. And what that unenlightened state is the state of this from that logic. Day from night, them from us, right from wrong, good from evil. Okay? It seems as though people accept the existence of evil before they accept the reality of God. And this is exactly what he's done. He goes, from what source then are evils? See, when there's evil, suddenly you have a paradox when you consider the reality of God. But when there is no, when it's a this from that reality, day from night, right from wrong, good from evil, the struggle between two forces diametrically opposed, I don't know, trying to achieve a state of balance through all fucking eternity. You know, can you imagine anything more ridiculously futile? Well, there you have it. And so as such, we have the Epicurean Paradox. But when you realize that there is no antithesis to God's will here, that this is not a day from night struggle, that this is a reality once you get off the earth kind of enlightened realization. And that is that our relationship to God is not a this from that relationship. It's not a day from night relationship. It's not a good from evil relationship. It is a process of creation. It is not an obedience and, rejection of law and order or whatever the hell the goddamn Franklin Grahams want to push on the world. It's not a this from that reality. And Franklin Graham got it wrong because he thinks this from that, and Epicurus gets it wrong because he thinks this from that. They insist that there is somehow an antithetical will to the will of God here in this place because they don't understand that our relationship to God is a process of creation. And in that process, there is the latitude of growth, the latitude of bouncing off the walls and getting everything wrong. But God's will is still unopposed. Well, for the exception of what is the experience of individuality in the third dimensional plane, that is what God then allows to push back against him in his will and establish an individual identity, which is why God does not sit upon a throne and he does not govern. Because this existence is not about God, it's about us in society. That God will one day live with us, but not as a God of us. And that's why this is not about God. So therefore, the very nature of going to church and worship is an absolute exercise in complete futility. And in that, there you have the irony of your paganism. Right there, how you are lost in the darkness of this from that pagan ignorance, believing that there is somehow an antithetical will to the will of God here, and not realizing the divine truth that has been there the whole time. That God is like light to the dark. And in that, in order to understand the light, you have to also understand the dark. And in all truth, where in this universe is the substance of dark in opposition to the substance of light? It is not. And therefore, light from dark is not an antithetical relationship. And that is beyond the human ability in this point of time to comprehend freely, due to the limitations of your human consciousness still being trapped on the earth in the hominid experience of day and night. So you got a lot of growth to do. But at least you got to start, though. And in that, there is a God. But this God does not govern. And so therefore, that's why he does not remove what you perceive to be evil. Because what you perceive to be evil is nothing more than your inability to comprehend the relationship between the light and the dark in the third dimensional plane of reality. Your inability to perceive the universe in this with that terms, rather than this from that terms, which is what you're crippled by now. So, it looks like a hell of a lot of suffering you have to go through. And a lot of discovery and righteousness and growth, which is the whole idea behind the passions of living in life and engaging in the struggle of liberty. I'm glad the riots are happening. Seriously, well, not riots, they're protests. I'm glad the protest is happening in all 50 states. All 50 states. Holy shit, what a great day. To then bring that before them people who the Franklin Graham thinks should force obedience from us, to bring that to them and say, look, there's your 100% pushback. I want to read you something here. Also about the response of a few of these people from the Supreme Court decision. One was kind of something here. A guy by the name of E.W. Jackson. Let me look him up. Let's see who this is. E.W. Earl Walker Jackson is an American conservative politician, prominent protest minister. Oh, Protestant protest minister. Okay. Protestant minister and a lawyer in Virginia. He was a Republican Party nominee for Lieutenant Governor of Virginia in 2013. Okay. What he says is, in relation to this, he goes, Neil Gorsuch has betrayed the Constitution, the American people. Neil Gorsuch is a Supreme Court justice. And it just had the decision that included, I just said that. And so he's talking about that Supreme Court decision here. And he goes, Neil Gorsuch has betrayed the Constitution, the American people, and President Trump. Betrayed. He has joined the backstabbing Roberts and denigrate leftists on the court who are engineering sweeping social depravity and confusion through judicial tyranny. Now every employer must accommodate some mentally ill person who thinks he's a woman today, a man tomorrow, and a combo the next, or be sued, using some common sense and protecting your business. This is beyond disgusting. He says it's a declaration of war on the American people, our business and culture, Constitution and Judeo-Christian values. I don't see how it is a constitutional thing. I mean, inclusion's a constitutional thing, not discrimination and oppression. Because this is beyond disgusting. No, what is beyond disgusting is the demand that people obey you and your demand of conformity. Conformity to heterosexuality. Probably monogamy and all that other goddamn shit. To where, sex can only be for procreation? You're going to, by law, then say how many kids people have to have? I mean, Christian governance and Sharia is no different, really. Both of them are horrible. And this guy, in another life, he'll probably be an extremist hammam. Now he's an extremist Christian. So he equates pedophilia with and everything else. That's always what they do. They'll always try to say, think of the children. So they always include pedophilia in the analogy. But what we have here in all these religious people is not one. I mean, as far as like the far right goes, those voices here on this and against this decision and the way that they speak, these are not peacemakers. These are not people who would preach tolerance and acceptance in their congregations. They preach this from that, hatred, and they expel people. I would imagine they'd probably create some kind of weird ass reprogramming center and call it God's divine mission or whatever. And that's how God then reveals it. In the way God kind of communicates to me, one of my most recent things, like within the last 24 hours, has been the acknowledgement from him that my concern over the wolf in sheep's clothing business is legitimate. And he acknowledges that concern. And that's what we have here in these religious rites, like E.W. Jackson, Tony Perkins, James Dobson, Franklin Graham, Stephen Andrew. They all are not peacemakers. They've infested the church to become war starters. And as they are war starters, and as they are speaking as though they are speaking for God, makes them the wolf in sheep's clothing. Now what the wolf in sheep's clothing is, let me bring up a little thing on that. Oops. I should have prepared, I'm sorry. Okay. Wolf in sheep's clothing. Okay, it is the wolf in sheep's clothing is a biblical idiom from biblical origin used to describe those playing a role contrary to their real character. I need to look it up in the biblical sense. I need to find it in the Bible. Okay, I'm sorry. Wolf in sheep's clothing. There we go. King James Version, the text reads, "Beware of false prophets when you come." Beware of false prophets. Let me look that up. Matthew 7:15. Shit, I need. Jesus, come on now. Bitchy ass computer. There we go. Man. It's like trying to find a non-political Bible study guide. Yeah, good luck with that. Okay, it says, Matthew 7:17. Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravaging wolves. Now, that's what we have in the war starters, who have subverted the word in order to ravage humanity, as they really intend on doing. And it's getting clearer and clearer as we go along this road into the future, to where eventually, we're going to be able to see this, it's going to get clearer and clearer where we're going, that's for sure. But it is not toward the right. Because you see, the right is not, the political right presently is not going in the way of individuality and the way of enablement. They are going in the way of restrictive obedience demands. They want us to obey to create the single life lived in total obedience. That's what they want. They just want obedience. And through obedience comes, your enslavement and servitude. So, that's not where God is. That's for sure. Because God's out here with me. Because that's the whole reason. Well, was the question that I asked of myself in that moment of true, honest sincerity. Does God hate me for being who I am? And the answer that came was a new dogma that proved to me not only was it okay for me to be me, who I truly was, who the church said I could not be. Not only was that okay, but that's what God intended me to be. To set me up to ask that question of myself in sincerity, and then receive this new dogma in validation of that identity, to then bring forward on this earth. And in that, ensure that that those wolves in sheep's clothing are exposed and admonished for what they truly are. The war starters, the false prophet that they have claimed, that they have accused everyone else of being. You know, the whataboutism defense. Alright, well, that pretty much takes care of what I've got for the moment. Things are going to get, you know, a little more intense in the world, as they should. Because this is change that is upon us, so stay tuned for more. Because maybe this time, this revolution will be televised. Alright, we'll see you soon.